Hello, everybody. My name is Diane Paoni, as Lisa mentioned a moment ago, and I work in Wisconsin Bureau of Planning, Economic Development. I was invited about a year and a half ago to work with Lisa's team and other rail experts at WISTOT on the update to WISTOT's rail plan. So in this presentation, I'm going to give you a little bit of background about our existing rail plan, how we're going about our process of doing the new one, and I'm going to provide for you a little bit of commodity flow tables of information. We were hoping to have the plan ready to go out to the public as a draft before this conference, but we're a little bit behind on that, so at least I can show you some of our data. So the draft rail plan is based off of our last rail plan, which was done in 2014. All our rail plans cover the full variety of rail. So we've got crossing, safety, we have environmental considerations, equity, freight rail, commuter rail, and intercity passenger rail. There was a need to refresh the plan. This is like an odd angle to see what slide you're on here. There was a need to refresh the plan because in 2014 when we did it, it was just about when FRA came out with 37 pages of guidance on how to do a state rail plan. It had 12 requirements for content and 10 for public involvement. So the one that we're doing right now brings us up to speed with that. It also brings us up to speed with updating our commodity flow and safety data. So the new rail plan is going to come out after our multimodal plan, Connect 2050, was adopted. So it will be supporting the goals of Connect 2050. Connect 2050 goal are high-level statements that set direction and identify topics of critical importance to WISTOT in furthering statewide multimodal system, especially in the economic development, mobility, and safety goals. So we have a few different phases with this plan. The one that we've already completed is our initial kickoff. That's when I came to you folks for the first time to tell you that we're going to be doing this plan and to put the seed for you that we're going to start some outreach. So I've also done some presentations to the Freight Advisory Committee and the various other stakeholders throughout the state before we even started writing the plan, so we could have everybody's perspective. It's important to have public involvement from the very beginning and often throughout the plan. Right now we're in the blue box there, which is where we're creating the draft rail plan. We'll be putting that out for public involvement, which I'll discuss in a sec. After that, we'll make some changes to the plan based on people's feedback. And then we'll create a draft final plan and go out for our final sequence of public involvement. All right. So since the last rail plan in 2014, lots of stuff has happened. Some things that haven't changed, though, is the commitment to safety. When I first came to this conference, I was surprised that the first thing you guys do is have a safety briefing. So that has been my cultural immersion in working with rails and harbors and everybody, is just how consistent and thorough the commitment to safety is. So this rail plan will continue that commitment, and it will continue it from a multimodal perspective, especially at the crossings with drivers, pedestrians, and bicyclists. As this plan was being developed, we were a little bit slower than we thought we were going to be. That happens with COVID, which came just about while we were kicking that off. The good part of that story is it's allowed us to include 2 items in the plan that we hadn't originally thought we would have time to do. Chris Summers made the presentation this morning about the Rail Crossing Safety Action Plan, so we're able to incorporate the highlights and results of that into the plan. We're also able to finish a passenger rail demand forecast for our intercity passenger rail. I believe we were looking at the last one, Lisa, was 2006 or 2009, something like that, so it was way overdue. So we're glad to be able to include that in this plan as well. We also make some references to significant work that's done on the federal level with changing requirements for the rail cars that carry flammable materials. That was an important concept that came up, a concern of the public when we did the last plan. So for passenger rail, Run is in the room here. Him and his team made some significant changes and improvements since the last rail plan. The thruway bus connections, which are the branded, purposeful intercity bus connections from rural areas into the passenger rail system, have increased from 6 to 9 routes since our last plan. The Mars Airport Station platform was extended, and that was completed. The second platform will be let in December. Muskego Yards bypass funding has been identified, and dedicated environmental documentation has been completed in that as well. Hopefully you folks are familiar with the Twin Cities Milwaukee-Chicago service, which would increase one extra passenger rail trip in each direction between Milwaukee, Chicago, and Twin Cities. There's been significant work on that now, and it's in the design phase. And we're also in the preliminary design for CTC signaling. So freight rail considerations that were brought into the plan, you're already hearing about some of them right now during this conference. So people are talking about the Northwoods changes, the CPKC merger. There's also been significant changes to commodity flows with COVID, so we're going to get that in a sec. And we're also going to keep up to date our project listing tables in the plan. For the FRIP and the FRAP projects, for those programs, they have a regular cycle of projects that are funded, and that will be kept up to date in the plan. All right, so I can't quite let the cat out of the bag for everything that's going on with the draft plan yet until it's released, but I can share with you some of our commodity flow. So I brought some table examples, just giving us some highlights. These are pre-COVID dates. So much has been disrupted with the last couple of years with COVID. We still are seeing some continuation of that disruption nationally. And so we decided to stick with our base years being pre-COVID. All right, so this is rail shipments in Wisconsin with a pre-COVID 5-year snapshot. The teal data is car loads and intermodal. The lighter color are tons. So the total rail units stay about the same. The increase in intermodal units offsets the decrease in car loads. So we end up with about the same numbers at the end of the period, even though there's significant changes going on in the mix. So rail shipments by type, tonnage, and value. This is a 1-year snapshot. We're kind of counting this as our last full year before the COVID effects on the economy are seen. The tonnage, again, is in teal. The value data is in the lighter color. It shouldn't surprise us that the overhead transfers dominates the rail movements, both in terms of tons and values. This is a theme we've seen for years in Wisconsin. Okay, so total outbound commodities by tons and value. Tonnage is in the teal, value is in the lighter color. These are a listing of the top commodities. In the actual plan, we'll have a full list of commodities, but once you get past these first couple ones, there's a major drop off into the single digits. This is dominated by gravel and sand. Most other commodities are single digit percentages after that. Again, this is fairly consistent that we've seen over the years. So top inbound commodities by tons and values for the same year. Again, tonnage is in the teal color, value is in the lighter color. This follows the same list that we used before, and that you'll see the top commodities. The actual plan will have the full list, but once you get past these first couple, the numbers drop off significantly. You can see that coal to Wisconsin's power plants and iron ore are the only double-digit percentages by weight. Plastic, the only double-digit percentage by value. So here we are within Wisconsin for the same year. Same thing with the tonnages in teal, value is in the lighter color. Grain is the highest by tonnage, moving around within Wisconsin. Plastic is the highest by value. The top overhead commodities, again, overhead being the biggest movements in the state. And so we did a freight forecast for all modes for the plan. And what we did in the rail plan, we also shared with Matt Humafer's freight plan. So we did a 2050 forecast with 2017 as the base year. We could have moved that up as a base year a year or two, but we wanted again to make our forecast as if COVID did not occur, because we're right in the middle of seeing how that plays out, and we don't want to be making any forecasts based on something that variable. So Transearch did the forecast for us. Freight tonnage is forecast to increase by 78%. Of all the modes, rail shipping is forecast to increase the most, with a 119 increase in tonnage and 172% increase in value. Brought the two main tables of data. All these show some change. The freight rail shows the highest by tons and also by value. Teal being tons, the lighter color being value. We also did looking at the different kinds of movements that we discussed in the snapshot from 2015 to 2019. These freight rail specific elements show an increase, with overhead freight rail growing the most. So when I met some of you before the meeting, I told you that I was going to be asking some questions at the end so that we can hopefully get you to interact a little bit with us. So we had to make a decision on what our base year was, how to deal with COVID. What are you seeing in terms of your freight movements now that we're 2 years into COVID, but moving into the high interest rates and all the other disruptions? Are you seeing any changes in your movements or returns to what patterns you saw in the past? Not quite sure. Okay. Well, there'll be opportunities to interact a little bit more, to share what you're seeing. I'll be taking good notes this afternoon when it's time for everybody to share what they've been up to. So the rail plan is anticipating doing the draft, as the secretary mentioned, coming up pretty soon. Yeah, we do talk a bit about the changes in the EPA engine standards and how those are being adopted in to the passenger rail that we have an influence over. So we do discuss that, and it's I don't have the statistics on the top of my head, but the newest EPA versions of the locomotive engines have a dramatic reduction in, for instance, the amount of energy it takes to drive the locomotive, and in the pollution that comes out in terms of particulate matter.